Hi everyone, I'm Mary and today I'm doing a wrap up for all the books that I read in April. First book I read was The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. We follow our main character Esta, who is a thief that grew up in Manhattan in an alternate world where magicians are real. Manhattan is surrounded by this thing called the Brink, and if any magician passes into Manhattan through the Brink, they can't then leave without their magic being drained by the Brink, and they just can't survive having that done to them. Esta is a magician with the ability to manipulate time, who steals things from the past and brings them back to the future for her boss. In one of the missions, she steals something from the past in the 1920s, and when she comes back, she's accidentally caused this old order who used to hunt magicians to be really powerful in her time, and also has caused one of her friends to have never existed at all. So she ends up being sent back to the early 1900s to infiltrate this gang who are trying to steal this mythical book about magic and about magicians from the order back then, in the hope that they'll be able to learn something about how to bring the Brink itself down and free magicians in Manhattan, and everything kind of goes from there. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really fun and fast paced, and I loved our main character Esta. She was really grounded and well fleshed out, and she reacted sensibly to a lot of the situations she found herself in. She wasn't, one of them stupid main characters that you get a lot of the time. I loved how this book addressed time travel and really pointed out how what Esta does in the past can have major changes in the future, even if it's just something as small as being seen by the wrong person. I really liked how they she was so conscious of what she was doing and what she should and shouldn't be doing in the past in case that causes even more problems in the future. And I really liked that they were really conscious of that and didn't just have it in as a gimmick and then kind of forget about it and the plot doesn't require for any changes to happen in the future, so we're just going to ignore that. No, they do actually try to make it feel like there are consequences for the things that Esta does in the past. I did really like the 1900s setting. I thought they utilised it really well, and it really felt like the character was there. I'd read a book the month before where it was supposed to be set in the 1930s, and honestly it could have been set in our time. I didn't really feel like we were in that setting, so I felt that with The Last Magician, you definitely felt like you were back in the 1900s and stuff, with the world building and the costumes and the attitudes and the way people just behaved and stuff. So I thought that was really good. There's a whole cast of characters that you meet, and I really enjoyed each and every one of them. They've all got their own backstories and their own secondary motives and stuff. No one's 100% telling the truth. No one's exactly who you think they are at the beginning of the book, and I really liked that about them, and I liked this sort of mesh of people that Esta had to sort of navigate around and try and win over their trust in this gang so that she can then be a part of this heist. Everyone has more than one motive and agenda, and it was really fun to see how that all played out against the other characters who also have their own motive and agenda that they're keeping hidden. I did guess some of the plot twists later in the book, but I did actually mind that because I thought they were built up to in a really good way, to the point where even if you do guess them, the weight of what happens and the gravity of what happens doesn't take a knock just because it's not shocking anymore. Just even if you know it's coming, it still has weight and it still affects the story, and it's not just relying on the shock value to have impacts. I really liked that. It's hard to say more without getting into spoilers because I am trying to keep this spoiler free for my wrap-ups. If I want to go into spoilers, I'll do separate videos. But yeah, I really enjoyed all these characters. I really liked seeing Esta's journey, and I liked the plot. I thought it was really fast paced. I loved the setting, and I believe this is a trilogy. I'm definitely going to be reading more of it. And as I said, this was great and really good handling of time travel in fantasy. There's a book that I read later that I'm going to get to that I don't think handled the time travel really well and really annoyed me, especially since I just read this and it was done so well. So yeah, definitely going to be continuing with the series, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Infinity Courts by Akemi Dawn Bowman. I loved this book. Like, I can't even articulate how good I think this book is. Bowman's already like a favourite author of mine. I've read all of her books and I was highly anticipating this, and I actually won this copy in a sort of cover scavenger hunt because look how gorgeous this cover is. It's so pretty. It's about a girl who dies and ends up in the afterlife, but when she gets there she finds out that it's been taken over by this sentient AI who has started this war between humans and the AI residents that also live in the afterlife, which is called Infinity. This book deals with some really interesting themes of humanity, war, forgiveness, understanding despite previous history. It's just incredible, like the conversations that the author starts and has this character have with other people in the story. Nami is our main character, and she is this young girl who gets murdered when she's 18, having just graduated high school. You know, she's got her whole life ahead of her, and seeing how she comes to terms with that and how she deals with the fact that she's not only been pretty brutally murdered and taken away from her family, but now she's got to try and find where her place is in this war. You know, you don't get to die and just, you know, be at peace. She's still got to fight for, you know, goodness knows how long, maybe even lifetimes now, because this has been going on for so long now. She's such a interesting character because she doesn't just get there and decide she's going to fight for the humans. She questions the resistance, she questions the war in itself, and that's what sparks a lot of the really good discussions, where she's questioning their motives about, well, we want to kill all the residents because they're trying to kill all of us, and she's just going, you're not really hearing the hypocrisy in the whole statement, no? And then obviously, but her almost neutral stance then obviously ticks off a lot of the other characters. You get to see all those sort of like dynamics and stuff of how she's trying to just find what she believes in and where her place is in this world that she's ended up in. She sees the war in shades of grey and questions everything everyone's telling her. She wants to make her own decisions and not be swayed this way or that by either side. And I really enjoy seeing that in a main character in a fantasy book, because quite often in fantasy books, you know, someone turns up, there's a war going on, they're with the resistance, they just sort of go with it. I really liked seeing a character that actually questions the motives of both sides and questions the whole war in and of itself. I read this book in one sitting. It arrived early, like a couple of days before the release date, and yeah, I couldn't wait, so I just read the whole thing in one day. Just Nami's just such a compelling main character. It's so fast paced. All the other characters that you meet are great. There's an enemies to lovers romance with a bit of a twist that I loved. Didn't even see the twist coming, even though I knew there was a twist to come. Just, oh, it's just so good. And Bowman's writing is fantastic. Her previous books have all been contemporaries. This is her debut fantasy novel, and honestly, there's something so magical about her writing that just fits so well with the fantasy genre. It's just so gripping, and as I said, I read this whole thing in one go. I want to reread it again, despite the fact that it's only been like 3-4 weeks since I read it. And as I said, the themes and discussions that they have about war and violence and the cycle of violence is just not something I see discussed all that much in fantasy. And that's just me, if I've not come across books like that. If you know any more books that deal with stuff like that, please let me know. I'd love to continue reading stuff like this. That's all I'm really going to say at the moment. I am definitely going to do an in-depth spoilery discussion review, so if you want to know more about it, keep an eye out, that's going to be coming. But definitely 5 out of 5 stars, amazing. I had such high hopes for this book and it met them and exceeded them, and it's just so good. The next book I read was Kingsbane by Claire Legrand, and this is the second book in the Imperium trilogy, which follows two queens separated by 1,000 years, Riel in the past and Eliana in the future. And in the past there was a prophecy saying that there would be two queens that would rise to save the world, a Blood Queen and a Sun Queen, and the Blood Queen would destroy it and the Sun Queen would save it. And we know from the get-go that Riel is the Blood Queen, even though she begins her journey thinking she's the Sun Queen. And then, obviously, since we know she's the Blood Queen, we then know that Eliana in the future is the Sun Queen. And yeah, this is the second book in the series. You're following Riel down her path to becoming the Blood Queen, and then you're also following Eliana as she's coming to terms with her magic and dealing with the consequences of what Riel has done in the past. I do really enjoy this series. I have really mixed opinions on it because I love the plot and I do like the characters, but then I also dislike a lot of things and they kind of overshadows the stuff I like about it sometimes. So yeah, it's an enjoyable read for me. I definitely am going to continue the series just to finish off the trilogy, but it's not something I would recommend to people and be like, oh, this is amazing, you should go read this. Like, you know, it's really enjoyable though. I thought this was a great sequel. It developed a lot more of the characters and the relationships. The stakes keep getting higher and higher, which I like to see. I really liked following Eliana. Of the two, I find her arc and her character to be far more compelling. I don't really think Riel's that interesting. I think, you know, a lot of her plot just practically revolves around her relationship with Audric, and even then that whole relationship's not that interesting and not as well fleshed out and built on as it could be. You know, they're just sort of childhood friends to lovers and that's just it. There's nothing more to it, at least nothing I can really see more to it. So yeah, I find her chapters to be a bit of a drag, and she's going through this villain arc, but I don't feel like it gets earned. She doesn't seem to be, a lot of the stuff that she does in this book that is like villainous and kind of horrible, she almost doesn't, she doesn't notice she's doing it half the time, and like it's like she comes back to her senses and goes, oh no, I didn't mean to kill all those people. It doesn't. So when she decides at the end to go full villain, don't think that's really a spoiler because you do kind of know that's going to happen. Sorry if that is a spoiler, but yeah, so she sort of decides she's going to go full villain. It doesn't feel earned, and it's kind of only because Audric's sort of given up on her. And again, it says that I don't care about their relationship. Speaking of that relationship though, there was this one bit where her consent was a bit, I wasn't sure if it was there, and it's not discussed. I was just like, okay, are we just gonna skip over that whole scene where he's sort of forcing her a little, but she seems into it? That's a bit I don't like that. I don't like that at all. We're just not going to talk about that. So maybe that, is that supposed to be some sort of, it was almost treated as though it's supposed to be sort of some romantic development of their relationship. Like, no, that was weird. No. I did like Eliana's arc, as I said. She's sort of trying to come to terms with her magic and how she's sort of become far more important than she sort of believed herself to be. And she's sort of dealing with the fallout of things that happened at the end of Furyborn. And I really like seeing her relationship with her brother and how that's been affected now that she's kind of found out that she's not actually related to him. Her whole relationship with Simon, though, again, not really something I'm into. It just feels a little quick and a little forced almost. Like in the first book, they didn't like each other at all. And then at the end of the book, he's basically just like, oh, I've been in love with you since you were a baby. And then in this book, they're almost, even though there's still kind of, there's a bit of back and forth, they become a couple and they start sleeping together and things, and like, it's fine, but at the same time I don't buy it. It just feels a little forced and almost like it was shoehorned in so that then things that happen at the end of this book have a bit more weight to them, but at the same time it's like, but his character does interest me and I want to find out more about this prophet that he works for. That's been this huge sort of, we hear about the prophet, we hear, the big things at the beginning of the chapter sometimes are little words from him, so I am really curious to see who he is and his place in this whole sort of world and stuff is, so that's something I'm interested about. So like, Simon's character is interesting, I just don't like his relationship with Eliana. It's a bit weird and a bit quick and a bit forced. This is the book that I mentioned earlier, that time travel has no obvious consequences, so there's this bit where, Simon can kind of travel through time a little bit, so their big plan is to, once he regains that magic, to send Eliana back to try and stop Riel from doing all the shit she does. And like, nothing happens as a consequence of it. It doesn't work. And all that happens is that like, a couple of minor things have been changed, and it never really seems to occur to them that, maybe we shouldn't do this because we have got no idea what consequences this will cause. They sort of act like it's their only option is to go back and make sure none of the things that happened have happened. It's like, well, that's obviously not gonna work. So it just sort of, I don't know, it was just annoying. And like I said, I like when time travel is actually treated with a lot more gravity and treated a lot more seriously than it was here. They were kind of just acting like, oh, this will be our great big fix, and then it didn't work, and they were like, oh, now what are we gonna do? It's like, maybe you could have got with something a bit more interesting than just, yes, we'll just make sure none of this ever happened in the first place. Like, that's obviously not gonna work. But yeah, genuinely, I do love though how feminist this book is and how it's such a celebration of all sorts of women and the relationships they have with one another and their place in the world. They're all so different, and 90% of the characters we meet are women. It's a very female heavy book, and I love that. There's not really a gender imbalance in this world, and the female characters all have different arcs and personalities, each have their own place in the story. And it sort of even pointed out some of my own internalized expectations and thoughts on women and stuff. This is one thing where they're talking about the captain of the guard of this, guard of people that look after Riel, and the whole time I was thinking, just imagining a man, just because automatically that was sort of almost what I've conditioned to think of. And then it turns out that entire cohort of fighters are all women. I was like, nice. Like, why did I think they would be men? So I like stuff like that. Both our main characters as well are just undeniably bisexual, and I love that that's explored. I love how this book explores sexuality and stuff. I also loved Jessamine, one of the characters we meet. She's asexual, at least on the ace spectrum somewhere, and I love that because I'm ace, so any ace characters we come across I'm just like, haha, hello. So yeah, I love that there's all these sort of different sexualities and different people and all these different women, and I love it. But yeah, lots of stuff I liked, lots of stuff I didn't like. It's a really enjoyable series for me. I am fairly invested in it most of the time. You know, it's not something that I'm feeling a chore to read. It's something I do enjoy to read, but as I said earlier, it's not something I'd be like, yes, you must go out and read this book. So yeah, I'm definitely going to read Lightbringer, and I gave this book a 3 out of 5. I then read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom for the third or fourth time. This was about a week before Shadow and Bone dropped, so I just really wanted to reread these books because I'd already reread Shadow and Bone earlier in the year. Oh, I also bought these gorgeous collector's editions because my copy of Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, I only have that on Kindle, and I decided I really love these books, but I actually really want physical copies, so I went and bought these, and they're gorgeous. They've got all this fantastic character art at the back of all the crows, and I love it. It's really just, I love a good bit of character art. It's so good. And just, the designs and the foiling and stuff. And these books are just still just as good on my third or fourth reread. I read these back in 2016 or something, and I wasn't expecting much out of them because I'd come off the Shadow and Bone series and I didn't really like that as much. But then I'd heard, Six of Crows is really good. And I was thinking, how good can it be? And then I read it and I've been obsessed with it ever since because, oh my god, it's so good. And it's just, as I said, still so good on a reread. I still care so much about these characters and what happens, and I always love rereading books and being able to pick up the sort of foundation work for plot twists or little things that they sort of seed early on and stuff that then gets resolved later on. And I read this all in one day and I read this in another day. Still good. Next up is Elatsue by Darcy Little Badger, and the cover, I'm going to be talking about book covers a lot. I love book covers, they're kind of the whole reason I'm at art school. Designed by Ravina Kai, who is one of my favourite illustrators ever. It's just, I just love her art style so much. But yeah, it's another book that I absolutely loved. Elatsue takes place in an alternate world that's basically the same as ours, except magic's real, and our main character Ellie has the ability to bring back the ghosts of dead animals. So she's, what the earliest sort of thing you see of this is she's sort of resurrected her dog who died a few years ago, so that she's still got her best friend and stuff, which is just cute. So it follows Ellie. She's a Leaping Apache girl, and she learns this magic from her family because it gets passed down from the eldest daughter to eldest daughter, and in having this ability, she has this sort of connection to the dead and to ghosts. So when her cousin dies, she sees his ghost, and he tells her, "I did not die in an accident. I was murdered. Please get justice for me, Ellie." So it becomes this sort of murder mystery as she and her family and her best friend Jay all go to try and discover what really happened to her cousin and how he really died. This book is so good. I love our main character. Ellie's adorable. I love her friendship with Jay. I love her little relationship she has with her dog. I love her. She's so curious about the world and about her power as well. A side plot where she's sort of thinking about, fossils and ghosts and thinking, well, can I resurrect something that died out thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, if I've got its fossil? So she sort of goes on this little side plot to try and find a trilobite fossil and see if she can resurrect it and stuff, which I thought was really cute.
I feel I should point out that one of the reasons I realised whilst I was editing this, one of the reasons I love that side plot is that just reminds me so much of my best friend who loves fossils and nature and stuff. And if she had the ability to raise ghosts, she would absolutely be trying to resurrect a fossil that she had. So that's just, one of the reasons I like that plot. I kind of just realised that as I was editing. But yeah, she reminds me of my friend.
She's also asexual, and this is brought up, it is addressed, but it's not the sole focus of the story. I do really like reading books with asexual rep where the story's not about them being asexual, they are just an asexual character, and it helps, I really like when books do that. It helps normalize it, and it helps me sort of feel, it's the same with most representation. If you always treat it as the sole focus of the story, it almost makes you feel like, it's only going to be accepted when that's what the story's about. I love when it's just a sort of side thing that is just just as normal as being any other sexuality. I loved learning about Ellie and her family traditions, and I loved hearing all the stories about her sixth great grandmother who has the same ability as Ellie and was quite a force to be reckoned with. And I loved how they used these stories of sixth great and what she went through to help them with their own situations and learn from it and sort of apply what she did to what they're doing now and stuff. I really liked all that sort of thing. I loved seeing the family dynamic between Ellie and her parents. I loved that, you know, they were just as involved in this sort of murder mystery as anyone else. It wasn't just one of those ones where the parents were just kind of there and just not really a part of it. I liked that they were just as involved. And as I said, I loved her friendship with her best friend Jay. He's dead cool. I don't know if there's going to be any more of these books or if this is just a standalone, but I would honestly love to just see more because I love just Ellie and Jay and their whole friendship and stuff. I thought that was so cute. And the magic was integrated so subtly. I really liked that about it, you know, because this is a world where magic is just normal. It's like the weather, it's just there, you know, and I loved how, you know, the author brought it up and explained it to the readers without it being sort of considered too weird in this world. It's sort of just as regular as anything else, and I really liked that about it. It was just so fresh and interesting. I've not really read anything quite like this for a while, so yeah, it was just so good. I loved it. As I said, the cover is gorgeous, and you know, we love a good bit of Native American representation and we love a good bit of asexual representation. So yeah, 5 out of 5 stars. Will highly recommend to anyone. It's really good. And finally, I read King of Scars and Rule of Wolves because I was just in a bit of a Grishaverse hole last month with the whole show coming out and stuff. So I had put off reading King of Scars for a while because I'd heard that, you know, obviously Six and Crows, Crooked Kingdom, absolutely love it, but I had heard from people who have the same opinion of me on those books as like, you know, it's kind of a bit of a step down from them, it's not as good, you're following Nikolai, Zoya and Nina. So I had put it off, but I decided, you know, the show's coming out, I really want to see what the author does later on in the series, so I can maybe, you know, see if I can work out if they're going to lay the seeds for that and stuff. And I'm glad that I read these in time for the show coming out, especially with Zoya's character. She's definitely, I think, my favourite, the arc she goes through in both of these books, and yeah, I just really liked seeing that. I won't go too much into it. I do want to do a proper like discussion about this duology and stuff, so I'll keep this brief. Yeah, I did really enjoy following Nikolai as well. I liked seeing the aftermath of what happened in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, as well as the events with Jurda Parim in Six of Crows. I like when authors don't just pretend that everything got magically fixed just at the end of the book. You know, you still got all this political stuff going on. The country's still completely in turmoil. Just because the fold's gone doesn't magically mean everything's been fixed. It was nice to sort of see Nikolai having to deal with that, plus just all this spooky magic shit going on. And it was interesting to see Nina out with the context of the dregs and out with Ketterdam actually as, because you know, in those books you read that she's a patriotic spy for Ravka, but obviously in those books she's kind of on a side quest to try and help Matthias and sort out her situation there before she can go back to Ravka. So it was interesting actually now seeing her in that role of spy for the king and what she's up to, as well as just the sort of, you know, seeing her after what happens at the end of Crooked Kingdom and how she's developed as a character because of how her powers have changed and who she lost and stuff. It was interesting I thought her character was really interesting to follow. My big issue with both of these books is, especially Rule of Wolves, was just how rushed everything felt. This needed to probably be like at least a trilogy because, you know, there was stuff that was built up that then had no payoff, but then and then no build up, so therefore the payoff was just, you know, I kind of didn't care enough about it in the first place. It just felt so crammed and fast, like, oh, we're going to be over here and this thing's happening and now we're going to develop this thing and oh, look, here's this character and now we're going to go over here, but then they're gone again. It's like, yeah, there was so much going on and so many people, and it just felt like a lot of it wasn't necessary. Like especially the cliffhanger at the end of this, there was no payoff for bringing back that character. There was no payoff to that whole plotline throughout the entirety of Rule of Wolves. So I was just like, well, what was the point? You know, it completely undoes everything that happened to that character in the original trilogy. So why, you know, you've kind of gone and ruined it now. You know, even at the end of Rule of Wolves, what that little tease at the end sets up, you know, where it's teasing another Six of Crows book. But it kind of fell flat because those characters had already turned up earlier in the story. It almost would have been better, because I liked in this book when, you know, there was those little mentions of Kaz and Inej and stuff like that. It was like little mentions, like, you know, where Nikolai makes a comment about how he learned to pick locks from a certain master thief in Ketterdam. I liked all that sort of stuff. I almost feel like having then those characters turn up, even however briefly, in Rule of Wolves meant that the tease at the end of there fell flat, because why are you teasing these characters when we've already seen them? You know, it's like you know, you want to tease things and have a payoff. You know, it needs to build and build and build and then reach the point. Whereas like this has been like, you know, okay, they're here, that's the fun bit, that's the high point. So then coming back down to like a tease, it's just like, oh, it's, you know, but we saw them like 20 chapters ago. Why do we care? So yeah, as I said, I found all those characters to be kind of shoehorned in. The whole issue in this book then had very little resolution in the next book. There's a character that straight up dies that I feel just didn't get built up as much as it could have been. I felt very little attachment to that character, both from the original trilogy and then in this duology. We still barely saw them. So yeah, as I said, there was either no build up, so therefore the payoff was just flat, or all this build up with no proper payoff. And yeah, it just needed more time and more fleshing out, I think. But as I said, I'm going to go proper into like spoilers and stuff because I have so many points that I want to say about it. I gave King of Scars 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked King of Scars. And then Rule of Wolves I'd say 3, but it's maybe between a 2 and a 3. Like, as I said, it was just so rushed and whatnot. You know, I really like her writing, but as I said, it just all felt so crammed and fan servicey without the fan service actually needing to be there. Sometimes, you know, you can get away with fan service in books and stuff as long as you're doing it with like almost a purpose. This literally just felt like, look, here's this character. Are you happy now? So, yeah. But that's everything I read in April. As I said, I'm going to do some more in-depth videos on some of these books and spoilers, but, you know, let me know what you thought of these books. Do you agree with what I have to say? Do you disagree? Please talk to me about these, because nobody else will. I'd love to hear everyone's opinions. But yeah, thank you so much for watching.